You know that feeling, right? You're sitting in a meeting, someone throws out an idea, and, well, you don't quite agree. But saying I disagree just feels, I don't know, really blunt. You just stop the conversation cold.
Yeah, or worse, depending on who said the original thing. Maybe someone senior, it feels risky, maybe even a little bit disrespectful.
Exactly. So what happens? You often just bite your tongue,
Right.
and this, maybe shaky idea just moves ahead, and you're kind of left hoping it all works out.
It's such a common thing in the workplace, that sort of tightrope walk. You want to speak up, especially if you see a problem or think there's a genuinely better way.
Right.
But you really don't want to mess up relationships or seem like you're just being difficult.
Your perspective could be really valuable, even crucial sometimes for making good decisions. But figuring out how to get it heard, gracefully, that's the tricky part.
It often feels like you've only got two choices: nod along silently or sound like you're spoiling for a fight.
But what if there's another way? A more sophisticated approach, a way to bring in a different viewpoint or voice, a concern that actually makes you sound, well, smarter and more considered.
That is precisely what we're diving into today. We've been looking at some really interesting information about these elegant English expressions designed exactly for that, navigating professional disagreements really smoothly.
Okay.
Think of it like learning the art of disagreeing without actually being disagreeable,
I like that. So our mission here is to unpack these useful phrases, figure out how and when to use them so you can feel more confident sharing your perspective in meetings or discussions.
Right. And the aim isn't just about avoiding that awkward feeling. It's about contributing effectively, making a smart impression, showing you can think critically but still keep things professional.
Sounds like equipping ourselves with some powerful tools. Ready to get into it.
Let's do it. So, to really understand why these particular phrases work so well, the information we looked at starts by talking about cultural differences, how disagreement itself is perceived.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. It pointed out a key difference, didn't it? Like in some places, disagreeing directly, especially, up the chain of command, can seem pretty impolite.
Exactly. Harmony and maybe being a bit indirect are often valued more highly, just to avoid any open conflict.
So in those settings, just blurting out, I disagree, would be really jarring. It wouldn't work.
Probably not. The focus is less on just the blunt truth and more on, saving face and keeping relationships smooth.
But then it contrasted that with other professional cultures, environments where actually having a robust discussion, where people express disagreement well, that's seen as healthy. It's even necessary sometimes to get the best result.
Right. And in those places, the quality of the idea, the strength of the argument, often matters more than who's higher up in the hierarchy.
Okay, and that's key for what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah.
As the information stresses in those kinds of environments, it's less if you disagree and much more how you say it.
Precisely. And these expressions we're about to explore are like the perfect tools for that. They let you be clear about your ideas without sounding confrontational when you deliver them.
So it's not just about being polite for politeness' sake. It's strategic phrasing. These expressions are designed to open up discussion, not shut it down.
You've got it. And the guidance we reviewed lays out 6 core expressions that are really great examples of this sophisticated way of disagreeing. Should we break them down?
Let's. First one, a way to gently signal you have a different take. I see it differently.
Yeah, this is a really polite way to show that your perspective isn't quite aligned with what was just said. The key word is see. You're not saying the other person is flat out wrong.
Right.
You're just saying that from where you stand, things look different. It feels less like a direct challenge and more like you're offering another viewpoint.
Using see keeps it neutral, focused on perception, not judgment. The example sentence they gave was, I see it differently. In my view, our priority should be improving the existing features before adding new ones.
That simple structure makes your different focus clear, but it doesn't just shoot down the other idea. And a little tip to remember this one.
Yeah.
Imagine you and someone else are looking at the same, maybe complex picture, but your eyes naturally focus on different parts. You're just pointing out what you see as important.
Oh, I like that visual. It's about perspective, not fighting. Okay, number 2.
Yeah.
I understand your perspective, but I'm not entirely convinced because...
This one's really useful when you get what the other person is saying. Like, you've listened, you've understood their logic, but you're just not fully sold on it.
Okay.
Starting with, I understand your perspective, that shows respect, shows you were actually listening. Then, but I'm not entirely convinced, signals your reservation. And the really crucial part is the because. That tells them you're about to explain why.
So you're not just disagreeing randomly, you're giving your reasons. It adds credibility. The example was, I understand your perspective on cutting the marketing budget, but I'm not entirely convinced because our data shows that our recent campaigns have delivered a strong ROI.
Yeah, that structure validates first, then pivot is very effective. For a memory tip here, maybe picture yourself nodding, like, okay, I get it, then gently holding up a hand as you bring in your counterpoint and the reasons behind it.
Acknowledge, then explain.
Yeah.
Got it. Moving on to number 3. I have some reservations about.
Okay, so reservation here isn't about booking a hotel. As the material explains, it means you have specific concerns or worries.
Right.
This phrase is great when you don't totally disagree with the whole idea, but you see potential problems or downsides that maybe need looking at. It's like raising a yellow flag, not a red one.
So you're flagging things for discussion, not killing the idea entirely. The example. I have some reservations about launching this feature without more user testing. We might risk negative feedback if it doesn't meet expectations.
Exactly. It shows you're being careful, thinking ahead about risks. It sort of invites the group to pause and consider those potential issues. To remember this one, maybe imagine you're about to go ahead with something, but you pause, kind of holding back slightly, because you have this specific worry nagging at you. You're reserving your full support until that concern is dealt with.
That's a good way to put it, signaling caution. Okay, number 4. I'm not sure if that's the best approach because...
This is a softer way to question the chosen method or strategy.
Yeah.
Saying, I'm not sure is much gentler than saying, that's not the best approach, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It frames your point more like you're uncertain about whether this is the optimal way, rather than directly criticizing it. And again, that because is vital for giving your reasoning.
It feels less like a final judgment and more like, hey, should we maybe consider other ways?
Yeah.
The example sentence. I'm not sure if that's the best approach because it might require more resources than we currently have available.
Yeah, it opens the door to talk about feasibility, maybe other methods. For a memory tip, maybe picture yourself doing a slight shoulder shrug and tilting your head like you're genuinely thinking, is this really the very best way we could do this?
That captures the slight uncertainty nicely. Okay, expression number 5. Have you thought about the implications of?
This one's clever. It's more indirect, sometimes called a Socratic approach. You're not actually stating your disagreement.
Oh.
Instead, you use a question to prompt the other person, or maybe the whole group, to think about the potential consequences or effects of their idea, maybe negative ones that you can see. You're nudging them to consider the impact themselves.
So you're kind of guiding them to see the potential issues without pointing fingers. The example was, have you thought about the implications of changing our pricing model on our existing customer base? They might perceive it as a value decrease.
Exactly. You raise a potential problem, but it feels more like collaborative thinking or deeper consideration, not a debate. To remember this one, maybe imagine yourself thoughtfully tapping your chin or pointing a finger upward slightly like, hang on, let's think about the ripple effects here.
That feels very constructive.
Okay.
And last one, number 6. I respect your opinion, though my experience suggests.
This one was highlighted as being particularly diplomatic, really polite. It's especially useful if you're talking to someone more senior, or maybe when you want to stress that your different view comes from actual evidence or past experience.
How does it work?
You start by explicitly acknowledging their view. I respect your opinion. That helps lower any potential defensiveness right away. Then you introduce your counterpoint, but you ground it in your experience, which is harder for someone to argue with directly.
Leads with respect, then backs up your point with something concrete, your own history or knowledge.
Yeah.
The example given. I respect your opinion on using this technology, though my experience suggests that it might have a steeper learning curve than we're anticipating.
Exactly. It shows respect while still bringing important information to the table based on what you know. For a memory tip, maybe imagine giving a slight respectful nod as you say, I respect your opinion, before kind of standing a bit taller to share the insight you've gained.
Wow, okay. These 6 phrases really cover a great range, don't they? From just gently questioning something to respectfully challenging based on actual experience. It really moves things away from that blunt, I disagree.
Absolutely. And beyond just the phrases themselves, the information also shared a really useful general guideline for disagreeing constructively. They called it the 3R principle.
Yes. Respect, reason, and recommendation.
That's it. Start by showing genuine respect for the other person and their idea. Then, clearly state your reason for seeing things differently or having those reservations. And then, if possible, offer recommendation or suggest a constructive alternative.
That framework really shifts disagreement from being a conflict to being more like collaborative problem solving.
It does. And there was also that simple but really effective tip about how you say it, your delivery, using a slightly slower tone of voice.
Right. Instead of sounding maybe defensive or worked up, speaking calmly and deliberately makes you sound more thoughtful, more considered. It gives your words more weight.
Definitely. So we have these tools, these phrases, and this general approach. But how do you pick the right one for the right moment? The guidance actually gave some common scenarios.
Okay, that's helpful. Let's run through them. Say you're in a meeting and you just generally see things differently. Your overall perspective or vision doesn't match what's being proposed. Which phrase fits?
I see it differently. That's probably your go-to starting point there. It's broad enough for a general difference in viewpoint without getting stuck on tiny details right away.
Makes sense. What if you've listened, you understand their argument, but you're just not totally convinced, and you want to explain why you have doubts?
Then you'd likely use, I understand your perspective, but I'm not entirely convinced because it shows you've heard them, but you see issues in the reasoning that you're ready to outline.
Okay. And if you don't disagree with the whole thing, but you see specific potential problems or risks that make you uneasy?
That's the perfect time for, I have some reservations about. It flags those specific concerns that probably need looking at before everyone moves forward.
Right. What about if you're not necessarily worried about risks, but you look at the method they're suggesting and you just think, is this really the best way to do this? You want to question the approach itself.
I'm not sure if that's the best approach because Dilish is tailored for exactly that situation. It gently questions if the method is optimal and invites talk about other ways.
And if you want to subtly get someone to think about potential downsides they might have missed, using a question instead of stating the problems directly.
That's a Socratic approach. Have you thought about the implications of? That's your tool. It prompts them to think more deeply about consequences.
Clever. And lastly, when you really need to disagree, maybe even with your boss, and you want to be super diplomatic, lead with respect, then offer your alternative view based on your own track record.
That calls for that really polished phrase, I respect your opinion, though my experience suggests. It uses your credibility while still showing deference.
Seeing them laid out by scenario like that really shows the strategic thinking behind choosing the right words. It's not just about being polite, is it? It's about being effective and making sure your point lands well in these tricky professional conversations.
Absolutely. It's about contributing constructively, not just opposing things.
Okay, let's do a super quick recap of the 6 key phrases we've covered in this deep dive on the art of disagreement.
Sure. We started with, I see it differently, for when you just have a different overall perspective.
Yeah, I understand your perspective, but I'm not entirely convinced because, which is for explaining your doubts after hearing them out.
Third was, I have some reservations about it, used when you have specific worries about an idea.
Followed by, I'm not sure if that's the best approach because,
Oh.
for gently questioning if the chosen method is optimal.
Fifth, have you thought about the implications of? That question-based way to raise potential consequences.
And finally, the very diplomatic, I respect your opinion, though my experience suggests. Great for respectfully offering an alternative based on your background, especially upwards.
You know, what the information we looked at really emphasizes is that using these kinds of thoughtful phrases isn't seen as being difficult. Actually, it can boost your professional standing, it can earn you respect.
How so?
Because it shows you're engaging critically, you're thinking deeply, and you value finding the best solution together collaboratively.
It turns something that could be negative, like conflict, into a chance to show your analytical skills and maybe your emotional intelligence, too.
Exactly. And while these phrases we've discussed are super versatile for lots of situations, disagreeing with someone who's directly your superior, someone in authority, that often adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it? Needs even more careful handling.
That's a really important point. How do you politely push back or offer a different view when there's a significant power difference?
Well, that's actually what our next deep dive is going to focus on. We'll look at specific language and strategies designed for politely pushing back or disagreeing upwards, all while staying professional and respectful.
Oh, that sounds incredibly useful. Definitely a tricky area to navigate. Looking forward to that. For now, though, start thinking about these 6 phrases. Maybe practice them in your head. Picture those scenarios.
Yeah, get comfortable with them.
So you're ready to contribute more confidently and effectively next time you're in a discussion.
Mastering this really is a big step up in professional communication.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.